Hey, and welcome back. Now, this is, we're talking about entrepreneurship, and we've talked about the entrepreneurial mindset. We've talked about customers and things. Now we're going to talk about actually building something real that you can actually then get feedback from customers. We're going to talk about the minimal viable product. And so I'm going to add our slides here, the minimal viable product and the build, measure, loop, learn loop. Those are two key concepts when we're building something, small that we can actually use to gather information from customers as we see how they interact with what we've built and how they use it, and if whether they like it, right? So the here's the myth of the perfect launch. There's never you don't want to wait for the perfect launch. You want to launch early and just figure out stuff and launch in the simplest way you can, with a product or service that you can actually is good enough that you can measure your key assumptions. That's the key. The fantasy is that the idea is fully developed, the product is perfectly polished, and every detail is figured out. And on launch day, the customers just come flooding in, right? Yeah, right. Think about this. Jeff Bezos packed books in a garage, before Amazon even had a warehouse. I mean, he started out just selling books, right? Amazon, and then little by little grew. They didn't even have a warehouse. I mean, it wasn't, starting before perfect isn't a compromise. It's your strategy. It's actually the strategy. And the reality here now, right? You can't know what perfect looks like before real customers react. I always like that von Moltke. He was a Prussian general. He said that no battle plan ever survives the first contact with the enemy. It's the same thing. No product is going to survive the first contact with customers. You have to see. You have this idea in your mind, and then you have to take that feedback from customers and build what they want, not what you think they should have. And waiting means building the wrong thing. You're just waiting and wasting time, wasting money, wasting your talents. The info you need only arrives when real people use it. And that is absolutely key. So, how do we build the simplest version that teaches you the most? That's the key. So, this thing called MVP, right? That's a minimal viable product. And it's not just a piece of junk that doesn't work or something like that. It has to be something that is tangible, or just a concept. It has to be something that's tangible enough that people can actually respond to it and use it in some way. So it's not like a broken, half-made prototype. You want to cut the scope of your idea, rather than the quality of it, and build only the core feature. A lot of times what happens is with this thing called feature creep, where it's like, oh, and I'm going to add this bell and this whistle, and oh, I'm going to do all this stuff, and then they'll like this and that, and you keep the product keeps getting bigger and bigger before you've actually tested and seeing whether people like it at all. So don't fall into that trap, right? So that's the minimum, minimal kind of thing. You're boiling it down to its essence so you can test that assumption, that essential assumption that you have. Viable, it's real enough that customers can react meaningfully and you can learn something. That's the key. We want to try to learn something. So customers have to be able to react meaningfully to what you've built. And the product that actually works, not a concept or a slide. It has to be something testable. We can make a drawing of the flying shoes and then say, what do you think about these flying shoes? But if you have a pair of flying shoes, even if they fly just an inch off the ground or 2 inches or something, that would be a whole different thing, right? Key question. What is the single most important thing that my product needs to do? And what's the fastest way to test that? That's the key. You're looking for boiling it down to the essentials or figuring that out. And this is really the key stuff. So here's 5 forms that a minimal viable product can take. A landing page, easy enough to build, right? You can build it on a simple website. There's free landing page platforms that will allow you to build a landing page that then you can send people to and see how they react to it. You test demand before building, right? Dropbox, the online storage uh, platform, got 75,000 signups from a video before writing any code. Talk about vaporware where that didn't really work yet, but they understood before we write this, spend the time writing this thing, let's see if people are really going to be interested and buy this. Do they think it's usable? Well, that's a great test. You get 75,000 signups, you're onto something. Then you can start writing your code in a hurry, right? A manual version, do it by hand first. Zappos, the shoe company, photographed shoes at stores and shipped them himself. Uh, uh, Shea, I forget his first name now, but he was just a brilliant business guy. No warehouse needed. He would photograph the shoes, put them online. People would ask for them, and he would buy them and ship them. Uh, and that tests whether or not you're doing something that doesn't scale, but you're learning if the fundamentals work, and then you can figure out how to scale, right? Even a paper prototype, right? Draw an app screen on paper. An hour of paper testing beats weeks of coding the wrong thing. Absolutely key. But nowadays, you can actually code things up with like Claude Code and a landing page platform, and just code it up pretty darn quick. Not even having coding skills. You can build a website landing page probably faster than you can draw one, and it'll look a whole heck of a lot nicer. A concierge MVP, serve a few customers personally. So you can figure out how, like Airbnb, right, where they started, they just used their apartment and put 3 air mattresses down. And so they were actually serving those customers personally, really find out what they like. So the simple first version too, Instagram launched one feature, apply a filter to a photograph and share, one thing done well. That is really key. And at the bottom here, format matters less than the principle. Build a minimum that teaches you the maximum. That's really what we're trying to do. And identify. So now we're going to move on. Identify your riskiest assumption. This is the key. The minimum. It's not just the minimal thing, but you want the most important, the most fundamental assumption, the riskiest assumption, the one that if that assumption isn't true, well, the rest of the things you're thinking about are academic. This is the thing that has to work before anything else flows out of that. So remember, every MVP is an experiment. Before you build, write down the one assumption your entire business idea depends on. That's obviously key. And that's going to be the fundamental thing. You think that this is the problem, and here's how you're going to solve it. And, like for a tutoring service, the riskiest assumption is, middle schoolers will actually ask for help, when it's available and affordable. What if they don't? What if they don't care? I started a company like that. I thought it was a great company. It was a food risk company, and we looked into, and we had brilliant people, and we're looking into if people, would like to know whether they should buy the tomatoes from this country or that country, or lettuce from here or there, and what had a more of a risk of making you sick or not. And you know what? People didn't really care. If so many people are going to, like, fast food places and stuff and drinking tons of soda, they don't really care that much about, the riskiness of their food in the supermarket. And the people, so we found out that, gosh, it really it didn't scale because the audience wasn't, there wasn't really a market that was interested in that and paying for it. So I learned that lesson the hard way. Custom phone cases, the assumption, teenagers at school pay $25 for a personalized case. That's a lot of money. Maybe they'd rather spend that $25 on candy or something. Who knows? Meal kit delivery, a risky assumption. People pay for a premium for the convenience of not having to plan and shop. For me, that doesn't work. It's like, it's not that difficult to go shop and to chop some vegetables and stuff and get ready. You don't need it all packaged for you to a recipe. So, for me, that never, the meal kit deliveries never made sense. But for other people, it does, I guess. So watch what people do, not just what they say. Behavior is more reliable than words. Absolutely. That's why when you have a website or whatever, you can see if people are going there, where they're looking, what they're looking at, if they're clicking on the subscribe button or the buy now button, all that kind of stuff. That's what you want to really see. It's the behavior you want to follow, not just what they say. Because people will say all kinds of kind things because they don't want to say something. It's uncomfortable to say something critical. So let's move onto this now, the build, measure, learn loop. And that's what we're doing. We're building, we're measuring, and then we're learning, and then we're doing it again. We're modifying what we build, measuring that, and then learning from that, and then keep doing that. And the faster you can do that iterative process, the quicker you're going to come to a product market fit. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to converge our product on customers, converge on that fit. So And what I like to say too is instead of like ready, aim, fire, which they used to say, ready, fire, aim, right? You're ready, you're building, fire, you're launching it, measuring, and aim is the learning part, and you're just going around like that. Because if you're ready, you fire, and then if you know, oh, I'm off to the left 2 degrees, you can course correct, and and then it's going to be that iterative process of dialing it in. So the core operating cycle of every successful startup is this, and this is from Eric Ries and his brilliant book, The Lean Startup. I highly recommend reading that book. And Eric just sent me his new book too, and I can't remember the name, but you know, it's really brilliant, and you should go get it. Whatever it's called, just look up Eric Ries. But it's a really, really good book. So build, you're going to build the smallest version that tests your riskiest assumption. We talked about that, right? And measure, collect data. Did they use it? Did they love it? Would they pay for it? Did they pay for it? And then you learn from that. You update your understanding, what to build next. You try to get feedback. Everything we do online now, right? There's like at the end, how did you like this with 5 stars? And you can, tell us some more about what you thought of our product and all this kind of stuff. That's a company getting that information and building off of that. Even the brilliance of Apple, right? Everybody thought they vertically integrated, not just selling the products, but then having the stores. And everybody thought, oh, having the retail part, the stores was a mistake. It's too much money. But what happens is the customers come in, customers have problems. I can't figure out my iPhone, my computer doesn't do this or that. And all of that information about customer experience gets fed back to headquarters, and then they design fixes for those things. And so they're polishing and developing the products as they go because they have that measure and learn feature in their stores built into the whole ecosystem of how they build and refine and modify their products. They're always downloading a new version of an operating system or something, and that's because they get this information in, and then they can fix bugs or put features in that weren't there, and that's how they get better. So you rinse and repeat, right? You're going to repeat this over and over. Each loop makes your product more aligned with what customers actually need. That's what we're looking for, that convergence, that alignment. So, um, yeah, this is really good. It's a nice slide too, huh? It's memorable. I like it. And I'd like to ask you if you like that slide. So tell me in the comments if you like this stuff, and then I can make this stuff better. That's how how I do it too. So there's two things in building this stuff and in this development process: persevere and pivot. Persevere means you're going to stick with it, and pivot means, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to change a little bit. We're going to change a lot sometimes. So when you're persevering, the data supports your hypothesis. What you built is working, right? After each loop, this is going to be the branching thing. Customers respond as you hope they would. You keep improving and expanding in the same direction. Now, pivot is when the data suggests something else, something needs to change. Keep what's working and change what isn't working, right? Double down on what's working and then modify and revise what's not working. You're not giving up, you're adjusting, right? Maybe the customer, the channel you're delivering it through, or the value proposition needs to shift. And so you have to be ready to do that. You can't hold on to, that's my idea, it's got to work. Sometimes you have to say, wait a minute, the feedback I'm getting means that, suggesting that I need to change this way or that. So famous pivots at the bottom here. YouTube, right? YouTube started as a video dating site and then became a video sharing platform. Can you believe it? Twitter was a podcasting platform called Odeo, yeah, and then it became the microblogging, messaging platform. It's now X, which is, Elon Musk bought it and called it X. And Elon Musk is now the world's first trillionaire. I mean, just an amazing, amazing amount of value he's created and captured for himself to some degree. But all the value that he's created is just absolutely remarkable. Slack was a gaming company, and they built a messaging tool for them to use internally, and that became their product. So it's amazing. This is how it actually happens. Pivot and famous pivots, right? Unbelievable. So starting small is an advantage. It's our strategy, right? And this from Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn. He was one of the guys who founded PayPal. There's this group called the PayPal Mafia, and Elon Musk was in that. Reid Hoffman, a number of other guys, and they made a bunch of money. Peter Thiel. From selling PayPal to eBay, and then they all went out and made other companies, and they call it the PayPal Mafia because their influence is really felt rippling through all kinds of different industries and companies that they created after they did PayPal. So he said, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you launch too late. That's really key, right? It's like, oh, it's not ready. It's not ready. No, launch, see what happens, and then revise and revise. And if you move fast, you can change you can change direction quickly. If you learn something new, you know, uh, that was the famous first motto of Facebook was move fast and break things. I mean, just go and do things, mess it up, then fix it, and then move forward. It's cheap mistakes too. When the stakes are low, failure costs are less, and it teaches you more. So these are inexpensive mistakes, and you want to make these mistakes before you discover later on, oh my gosh, I spent all this time and money and nobody likes my product. So serve personally, learn directly from your first customers. You can't do it that at scale, but you can do it at the beginning, that concierge kind of idea where you're just, do things that don't scale at first, where you're actually trying to learn personally from people and focus on learning. Scale comes after. First, we got to get that product market fit. And then we can figure about marketing and scaling up and all like that. So we don't want to jump the gun too fast. Okay, so here is for making your first MVP, a 5-step guide, right? Identify your riskiest assumption. Define what validated looks like. What is, the validated going to look like? Specific and measurable, like 10 signups, 3 payments, something. Choose your simplest MVP form. We talked about that, right? Landing pages, concierge, manual version. Build it and set a really, 1 week. You're going to build it in a week, and then you're going to, it's done and imperfect beats perfect and never finished, right? Um, Voltaire said, the good enough, perfection is the enemy of good enough. He said it in French, but and that's true, right? If you're going to keep trying to get perfect instead of good enough, and get it done. Real pros, professionals ship. They ship product. They don't wait and say, oh, it's not ready yet. So get it in front of real people. That's the thing. And not your best friends. You want people that are going to not feel uncomfortable about really telling you what they think about it. People who fit your customer profile. So here we go. Here are the key terms from this, right? MVP, we talked about that. The build, measure, learn loop. Persevere and pivot. Those are 2 key things. Finding your riskiest assumption and doing it lean, staying inexpensive, doing it cheap, and then learning. Focus on learning, right? That's really the key. So here, try it. Now is time to try it. Define the MVP for your business. Write down your riskiest assumption, very clean, 1 sentence, right? Decide what's the simplest thing you could build in the next week to tell you whether that assumption's true. Write down what a success will look like, in a specific measurable terms, right? And then set a deadline and start building. It doesn't have to be technical, you know, offer your service to 3 people, see if they use it, whatever it's going to be, something like that. So there you have it. I hope you go ahead and do this, give it a try, and we'll be on to the next video that after this. And I look forward to